Empire in Ashes, Inside the Fall of a World at War. Chapter 1. The Ember That Sparked the Inferno. The world had been teetering on the edge long before the first shots were fired. By the late 1930s, an uneasy silence had stretched across Europe, like a taut rope ready to snap. Nations fortified their borders, diplomats whispered of peace, and yet armies trained for the opposite. Behind the curtain of political promises, factories rumbled, building machines of destruction that would one day ignite the world. In the heart of Berlin, Reichstag flags fluttered violently in the wind as Adolf Hitler stood before his generals, proclaiming the dawn of a new empire. His voice echoed off marble walls, cold and unwavering, the voice of a man possessed by visions of conquest. The map before him sprawled across the table. Europe divided into colored lines marking imagined borders of the future. "This world is fractured," he declared, "and it is destiny, our destiny to reshape it." Across the continent, in London, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain read reports that chilled him more deeply than the gray autumn air. His advisors urged caution, but even they sensed the inevitable. Germany was preparing for something immense, something catastrophic. The tinder had been laid. All it needed was a spark. That spark came at dawn on September 1, 1939. Chapter 2. Fire over Poland. The roar of engines ripped through the sky over Warsaw as squadrons of Luftwaffe bombers descended with ruthless precision. Explosions rippled across the city, turning markets, homes, and streets into blazing ruins within minutes. Civilians flooded into underground shelters, while Polish soldiers scrambled to defend a homeland already collapsing beneath the weight of modern warfare. In a dusty trench near the Bzura River, Polish Lieutenant Wiktor Kulesa clutched his rifle as the ground trembled beneath him. His battalion had been battered for days, cut off from supplies, exhausted, and surrounded. Yet their resolve held firm. "We fight until we cannot stand," Wiktor said to his men, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Poland must see that we did not fall quietly. But the onslaught was relentless. Tanks rolled like iron beasts across fields, their treads crushing earth and bone alike. German infantry surged forward under the cover of artillery blasts. Within weeks, Poland was torn apart not only by Germany from the west, but by the Soviet Union from the east. The invasion had been swift, brutal, and merciless. The world watched in horror, and then, in fury, France and Britain declared war. The inferno had begun. Chapter 3. The Fall of Europe's Defenses. By spring 1940, German forces unleashed a military storm unlike anything the world had ever seen. Blitzkrieg lightning war swept across Europe with terrifying speed. In the forests of the Ardennes, French troops huddled in foxholes as thunderous explosions shook the ground. The Maginot Line, believed to be an impenetrable shield, was bypassed entirely. Tanks poured through Belgium and the Netherlands like a steel river, leaving shattered cities and terrified refugees in their wake. Captain Henri Duval of the French 55th Infantry watched helplessly as his defensive line crumbled. Communications had collapsed, air support was non-existent, and German armor pierced deeper each hour. "Fall back," came the order. "Regroup at Dunkirk." The retreat became one of the largest evacuations in history. On the beaches of Dunkirk, columns of smoke rose into the sky as Allied soldiers waited desperately for rescue. Ships of every size, from Navy destroyers to tiny fishing boats, crossed the channel under constant bombardment. Henry boarded a small civilian vessel piloted by an elderly British fisherman named Arthur. Shells splashed into the sea around them, but the old man never flinched. "Not losing you lads today," Arthur growled, hands steady on the wheel. Against all odds, over 300,000 soldiers were evacuated. It was a miracle in the midst of devastation. But even miracles could not save France. Within weeks, Paris fell, its streets echoing with the thunder of German boots. Europe's defenses lay in ruins, and the continent trembled as the shadow of the Axis Empire stretched wider. Chapter 4. Britain stands alone with Europe conquered. Hitler turned his eyes to Britain. The island nation braced for the worst as German bombers soared across the Channel, unleashing nightly firestorms upon London, Birmingham, Coventry, and countless other cities. In an underground command center, RAF pilot squadron leader James Whittaker studied radar blips streaking across the screen. "They're coming again," he muttered. Above the clouds, Spitfires and Hurricanes met the Luftwaffe in brutal aerial duels. The Battle of Britain raged for months. Flaming aircraft spiraled from the sky, engines roared like thunder, and the very fate of the world seemed to hang in the balance. One night, James soared through the darkness, leaving a trail of smoke behind him. His plane had taken a hit, but he refused to abandon the fight. "For home," he whispered, gripping the controls. He dove into formation, his bullets shredding the wing of a German bomber before pulling up just in time to avoid debris. The skies burned with streaking fire, but the RAF held their ground. At last, Hitler postponed his invasion plans. The British spirit had not been broken. "Never in the field of human conflict," Winston Churchill declared, "was so much owed by so many to so few." Chapter V. Flames across continents. While Europe burned, conflict erupted across Asia. Japan, driven by imperial ambition and desperate for resources, swept across China and the Pacific. The world trembled again on December 7, 1941, when Japanese aircraft unleashed hell upon Pearl Harbor. In the chaos of fire and twisted metal, American sailor Marcus Harlan pulled wounded comrades from burning decks, coughing through black smoke. "Help me with him," he shouted, dragging a barely conscious officer toward the water's edge as explosions rocked the harbor. The attack united the United States. Factories roared to life, producing tanks, aircraft, and ammunition at unprecedented speed. Soldiers trained by the millions. The sleeping giant had awakened. From the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Burma, from the frozen steppes of Russia to the shores of the Pacific, the war expanded into a truly global nightmare. Empires clashed, nations burned, and millions perished. The tide, however, would soon begin to shift. Chapter 6. The Turning of the Tide. The winter of 1942 brought the ferocious Battle of Stalingrad. Soviet defenders, under the leadership of General Zhukov, fought street by street, building by building, inch by inch. Snipers perched in ruined factories. Soldiers battled in icy trenches filled with blood and snow. Private Nikolai Volkov, exhausted and hollow-eyed, crouched behind a shattered wall as German soldiers advanced. His hands trembled not from cold, but from sheer fatigue. "For my mother, for Russia," he whispered. He steadied his rifle, squeezed the trigger, and sent a bullet through the lead soldier's helmet. The city became a graveyard of steel and frost. When the Germans finally surrendered, Stalingrad marked the beginning of the end for Hitler's dream of empire. In the Pacific, the U.S. Navy crushed Japan's advance at Midway. American codebreakers intercepted messages, allowing admirals to prepare a devastating ambush. 4 Japanese carriers sank into the sea, their decks engulfed in towering flames. Across the world, resistance movements grew bolder. Saboteurs blew up railways, assassins targeted Axis officers, and civilians risked everything to shelter those in danger. The winds of war were changing. Chapter 7. The Tide Becomes a Wave. By 1943, Allied forces launched a massive offensive across multiple fronts. In North Africa, General Montgomery and General Patton pushed Axis forces back through deserts scorched by unrelenting sun. In Italy, soldiers fought up treacherous mountainsides under constant fire. The beaches of Salerno turned red with blood as waves of Allied troops stormed ashore, determined to break through German defenses. Back in London, James Whittaker prepared for a mission that would change history. "D-Day is coming," his commander said. "Prepare your squadron." The plan was monumental. Thousands of ships, aircraft, and soldiers would cross the Channel in the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. On June 6, 1944, the beaches of Normandy erupted in chaos. Bullets tore across the sand. Explosions threw men into the water. Smoke curled into the gray sky as waves of soldiers fought their way inland. American troops struggled up Omaha Beach, climbing over metal obstacles and bodies alike. British and Canadian forces pushed through fierce resistance at Sword, Juno, and Gold. James soared overhead, providing cover as German artillery unleashed hell below. The sky shook with the roar of engines and anti-aircraft fire. Despite devastating losses, the Allies broke through. Europe had begun to breathe again. Chapter 8. Empire in Ashes. By 1945, the Axis powers were collapsing. In the West, Allied armies marched across France and into Germany. Towns and cities once filled with Nazi banners now lay in ruins. Survivors emerged from hiding places, gaunt, hollow, and forever scarred by the horrors they had witnessed. In the east, the Soviet Red Army surged toward Berlin with unstoppable force. Artillery fire shook the ground as soldiers advanced through streets choked with rubble. Nikolai Volkov, now a hardened veteran, marched alongside his comrades. The final battle had come. Inside a bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, Hitler raged at maps that no longer held meaning. His empire, once envisioned as eternal, now crumbled around him. Outside, Russian shells thundered like the footsteps of doom. Berlin fell in May. At the same time, in the Pacific, American forces captured island after island in brutal campaigns: Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Each victory brought more casualties than the last. To end the war, the United States made a decision that would alter history forever. In August 1945, atomic bombs fell upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Marcus Harlan, now serving aboard a U.S. ship near the Japanese coast, watched distant mushroom clouds rise into the heavens, symbols of both victory and unimaginable tragedy. Japan surrendered soon after. The world exhaled for the first time in 6 long, bloody years. Chapter 9. Aftermath of a broken world. Cities lay in ruins. Borders were redrawn. Millions mourned those who would never return. In Warsaw, Wiktor Kuleza walked through the shattered streets of his homeland, each step heavy with memories of comrades lost. Yet hope flickered in the faces of survivors rebuilding their homes from rubble. In France, Captain Henri Duval stood once more in Paris, watching families gather beneath the Eiffel Tower, celebrating liberation. The scars of war were everywhere, but so was the spirit to move forward. In London, James Whittaker visited the graves of fallen pilots, placing a single white rose on each stone. "For the few," he whispered. Nikolai returned to Russia a hero, though haunted by the ghosts of Stalingrad. His homeland had triumphed, but at an unimaginable cost. Marcus, back in America, stared at the quiet horizon, grateful for peace yet burdened by the memories of Pearl Harbor and the terrible power unleashed in Japan. The world had survived, but it had been forever changed. Empires had burned. Nations had risen and fallen. Millions had lost everything. But from the ashes, a new era began. An era shaped not by conquest, but by the fragile hope that humanity might one day learn from the devastation it had wrought. Epilogue: A world reborn. In the years that followed, countries rebuilt, alliances formed, and institutions were created to prevent such a catastrophe from happening again. The wounds of war slowly healed, though the memories never faded. Generations later, historians would look back on World War II not merely as a clash of armies, but as a tragic testament to the cost of human ambition and hatred. They would speak of heroes who fought for freedom, of civilians whose courage shone in the darkest moments, and of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. The world emerged changed, stronger in some ways, fragile in others. But above all, it emerged with a lesson carved into the foundation of history. Empires rise, empires fall. But humanity must never allow the world to burn again. And so, from the ashes of war, a new world was born, scarred, wiser, and forever aware of the cost of peace.